Hi everyone, my name is Maddie, welcome back to my channel and welcome to my September wrap up. So if you've been watching my videos this month, you will probably already know that I had a huge TBR, got into an awful reading slump and didn't read practically any of it. And I was technically taking part in Becca's Bookopathon this month. However, I only read one of the books that was on my original TBR for that and then read 2 out of the 4, which I rolled towards the end of the month in my sort of mid-month update, which I did to try and get myself back on track. And I am feeling like I'm coming out of the slump a little bit now. But yes, it was not my strongest reading month. It was not an awful reading month, but I definitely did not read anything like the amount I would have liked to. But nonetheless, let's get into some very quick stats and then talk through these books. Though I don't think this is going to be a very long video because there's not too many books to talk about. So starting off, as I always do with the stats, the total number of books I read this month was 7. I got through 7 in the end, which means I am now at 85 books out of 100 for the year, which is pretty good. That is definitely still doable by the end of the year. Just not quite where I would have wanted to be at this point. And then across those 7 books, it was 2,514 pages in total, which isn't bad, but is definitely below what I wanted because it averages out as 84 pages per day, and I always try and hit at least 100 pages a day, so it's definitely down, but I was still reading, so it's not the end of the world. However, I do find it really interesting. I try to read pretty much every single day. I occasionally miss a day or 2 each month. I worked out I only read 22 days this month, meaning there were 8 days, so over a week where I just didn't read anything at all. And my reading was really sporadic this month. I'm not going to put a full graph of it up, but I track how much I read every single day. And normally I read, 50 to 150 a day with a few really big days. I had so many days where I read nothing or maybe 5 to 10 pages, but I also had a lot of days where I read like 400 pages, which is really weird for me and also interesting, but I think is explained by the slump that I wouldn't want to read anything and then I'd get into a book suddenly, finish that book in a day, and then read nothing again for a few days. So it was really sporadic, but at least I got through a few things, so I can't complain too much. And then the average length of book I read was 359 pages, which about makes sense. Most of the books I read were 300 to 400 pages, so that would be roughly what I'd expect the average to be. And then in terms of the intended audience of the books I read, it was actually really different to normal in that I read 1 adult book and 6 YA. Normally I read about a 50-50 split, if not at the moment actually leaning more towards adult, but I guess with being in a slump I just wanted quick easy books, so lots of YA was read this month and I did really enjoy them, so I don't really mind. And then in terms of genre, again, different from my normal. I only read 2 fantasy books and I read 5 contemporary books, but that kind of doesn't surprise me. When I'm in a slump I find contemporary and especially romance books much easier to get through. So I was definitely prioritising those this month instead of all the chunky fantasy, which I am very much avoiding at the moment, though hopefully we'll get back to soon because I do love it. And then finally the star rating, and this is a little bit sad. This is definitely a lot lower than I normally rate books, and I don't know whether it was just bad luck and I didn't enjoy them or whether me being in a slump impacted my enjoyment, but I only had 1 5-star book this month. I then had 3 4-star books, 1 3-star, which isn't too bad, but I did have 2 2-star reads, which is really, really disappointing. So overall, not an awful reading month, but in many ways, just not what I would have wanted it to be. But let's get into talking about the 7 books, although almost all of these I've already talked about in videos, so it's going to be quite quick reviews and synopses for these. So as always, I will go through these books in the order that I read them, and therefore the first one I'll be talking about is Star Daughter by Shveta Thakrar. This I won in a giveaway, which is why I have an ARC of it, so thank you to the publisher for sending it to me. And I did actually read this in a day. I read this for the first Saturday of the month when I was hosting the Bookopathon 24-hour readathon, and I do have a vlog of that day up if you want to watch it. And this is a YA fantasy story about a girl who is half star and half human. And she's living in the human world as we know it and has to hide the fact that she's half star. She doesn't have any contact with her mother, who was a star. And then all of a sudden she kind of gets swept up into the fantasy world and has to go and live in the celestial court and compete in a tournament. I rated this 3.5 stars in the end. I debated between a 3.5 and a 4 for a really long time. And trust me, I wanted to give this book a 4-star. But I just couldn't quite. It started really, really strong. When she was in the human world especially, I was really enjoying it. And even the first part of her like going to Celestial Court was quite good. But then I very much felt it lost its way a bit once she got there. I lost the feel for where the plot was going. It lost its pacing quite a lot. I felt like I wasn't getting the detail I wanted, but also it was dragging and it just wasn't great. Also, I've heard a lot of people saying this, the romance didn't do it for me. Like I was rooting for it and I liked that it was a romance that was established before the beginning of the book, not a new romance. but it didn't feel overly convincing. I feel like we didn't see enough of the two characters actually interacting for it to feel really, really strong as a romance. But yeah, there were a few issues with this book. As I said, the pacing was really off, so it starts really strong, it's really quick, you get drawn into it really, really quickly, and then you go to the Celestial Court, and they keep referencing that this tournament's going to happen, and very much in the synopsis it mentions this tournament. And I remember being about 50 or 60 pages from the end and the tournament still hadn't kicked off. And I was like, are we gonna see this? And so it happens, you know, very quickly, and I feel like it was quick. Then there's like 200 pages in Celestial Court, which was really, really slow with not a lot happening, a lot of telling you and not showing you, which I found frustrating. I wanted to be learning about this stuff for myself instead of just being dictated a load of things. And then all of a sudden a bit of action at the end, then it ended. So I was quite disappointed. I think it's quite telling that although I did read this a few weeks ago, I cannot remember for my life how this really ended. It just wrapped up so quickly and so suddenly. So it is a good book. It says on the front that it's for fans of Laini Taylor, and I do actually agree with that. If you like the vibe of Laini Taylor, I think this is a kind of book you would really enjoy if you don't mind having less of the lyrical writing and maybe a slightly simpler plot. Like, I would almost say this is Laini Taylor, but for slightly younger YA or slightly younger readers, which is quite good, and possibly a good way to get into sort of fantasy and stuff if you're less familiar with it as you do start in the real world. I did love the fact that this was based off, I think, a lot of Hindu myth and things like that, which is not something I'm familiar with and found so interesting reading some more about, and I loved the sort of myths and tales that were referenced in here, and I definitely want to go and look up some of those for myself. So that was really great. But it didn't quite hit the mark. When I started this, I thought it was going to be like a 4 or 5 star, but then with the pacing and the okay writing, but nothing special, it ended up as a 3.5 for me. The next book I read was The Proposal by Jasmine Guillory, and I loved this. I gave this 4 stars. This is the 3rd Jasmine Guillory book I have read. I have read The Wedding Date and The Wedding Party before, both of which I loved. So I was pretty optimistic about this one as well. I did read this on ebook, as that's just how I have all of the Jasmine Guillory books that I have. And it was so much fun. This follows a woman who is moving back to LA to set up a law firm with her best friend, and when she moves there, she comes across this guy and then discovers that he is actually a senator, I think. I do not understand US politics enough to remember. I think he's a senator. So he's quite a big deal, and they end up getting together, but they obviously have to hide the relationship because of his status and the fact it would really bring her into the limelight, and she doesn't necessarily want that until they're quite settled. And she's also dealing with her company and all of that and her past, and oh, it's so good. I love Jasmine Guillory's books. They are so quick. The characters are always so funny and so strong, especially the female characters are always like really strong in themselves and know themselves well and know what they want and go out and get it. And all the female friendships are phenomenal. I loved the female friendships in this one so much. And yeah, just overall a really fun book. Good smut, as always. Got to love some steamy scenes from Jasmine Guillory. I really want to read more of her books. I know there's more out there and I'm definitely going to be looking them up. So really, really good fun. Really, really good fun. I'm a big fan. I don't really have too much to say on it because it's just sort of a fun contemporary read, but it was the exact sort of thing I needed at the time. Just a quick, easy, fun contemporary read to keep me going when I was struggling. And then after that, the next 3 books I read were for a secret TBR for a video of reading books about K-pop. You can check that video out there if you want to see my experience whilst reading them, but I will now talk through each of them and what I thought of them. So the first was I'll Be the One by Lyla Lee, which I gave a 4.5 star, I think is where I've settled on this. I love this book so much, honestly. It was so much fun. I cannot get over it. This follows a fat, bisexual Korean-American girl who wants to be a K-pop idol and so joins a competition sort of reality TV show in LA to try and become an idol. She auditions for both singing and dancing, and singing she's always been really good at, as she has at dancing, but it's taking a lot more for her to prove she can be a dancer due to her size and the prejudices from her family and from the K-pop industry as a whole, and this is just so cute, so fun. It deals with a lot of issues within both the K-pop industry and just how people judge each other. But I love that there were these 3 girls that you really centre around who are competing against each other, but just form fast friends. They have a common interest, they all love K-pop, they're all in this together. And so even though, yes, they are competing for one spot, the support they show each other is amazing, and I love that. Because it's really sad that in a lot of books like this, there's a lot of girl-on-girl hate, and they kind of just end up arguing and not getting on, and I think that's a real shame. So showing a strong female friendship, there's also a female-female relationship in this, but the main romance is male-female, and adorable. I love that the reality of sort of social media and fans and stuff is shown through him, because he is a very popular, well-known person already. He's a model and trying to become an idol as well, and just overall phenomenal book. So much fun, could not recommend it more. I read this in one sitting unintentionally. I sat down to start and read a little bit, and a few hours later I had finished it. Highly, highly recommend if you're looking for a book. Even if you don't like K-pop, this is almost quite a good introduction, because a lot of groups are referenced, and obviously I was familiar with a lot of them as I already like K-pop, so I knew what was being talked about, but it'd be quite a good way to be introduced to a lot of groups and could give you like a list of people to look into. Just a good book. Highly recommend it. The next book I read was Shine by Jessica Jung, which I have pretty much the opposite opinion of. I didn't like this book much at all. I think I ended up giving this a 2.5 stars, and I think that's possibly even slightly generous. I did not want to read this book. I was so excited for it, but I really found that whilst I was reading it, I just did not want to pick it back up. Every time I put it down, I didn't want to pick it back up. I was so disinterested in this book. I was so frustrated with this book, and overall it just was not a particularly enjoyable reading experience for me. This again follows a Korean American girl. However, this book is set in Korea. It's set in Seoul, where she is a trainee at a K-pop company and is trying to debut. She's been a trainee for quite a long time. Her family have uprooted their lives to be there for her. And I really do understand that the K-pop industry as a whole does have a lot of flaws. It has a lot of faults, and that needs to be discussed. But I get the impression, especially from what people have said in the comments who are more familiar with Jessica Jung, who was actually a K-pop idol herself and what she went through, that this is possibly a very jaded view of the industry. I am in no way saying that her experience wasn't what is shown in this book and wasn't valid, but considering this is a fiction book marketed as for fans of K-pop, I think it's quite disappointing that the only view in this is that K-pop is a really negative space. Again, that could well be the case, but I'm sure it isn't for everyone, and this was very much semi-autobiographical, I think, but fiction, so that, you know, she could sell it. And I just think it's a shame marketing this to fans of K-pop as it's so just negative the whole way through. And that takes nothing away from the experience she had or the experience she's trying to show, but I personally didn't enjoy reading about it. And I'm not saying this in terms of sort of turning a blind eye to all the bad things that are happening, but I think you can also appreciate the good aspects of something and see sort of like a leveled appreciation of it instead of just the negatives, which this felt just sort of like flogging a dead horse. It just kept going. And also it made me struggle to empathize with the main character, because she spent her whole time so miserable and so fed up and hating the industry she wanted to be in, and then you'd get these really small glimmers of why she actually wanted to be there. So I spent a huge amount of the book just being like, why are you doing this? Like, I understand fighting through adversity, I understand fighting through difficult times, but if you hate it that much, why are you pursuing it? And I feel like I therefore lost the motivation of the main character quite a lot, because I just couldn't understand it at all. I did like the romantic interest. That was interesting and brought up a very interesting point of how men and women are treated very differently in the industry, so I did enjoy that. The sisterly relationship was quite sweet, but overall, not a book for me, but maybe for some people. The final K-pop book I read was Come Back, a K-pop novel by Lynn Ashwood and Rachel Rose, and I really enjoyed this. I gave this 4 stars. This is a really fun YA contemporary romp through K-pop, basically. And it follows this guy who's part of a boy group who debuted a few years ago, and a girl who used to be a fan of this group and actually has had an interaction with one of the members of the group. And you're following both of them separately, and then you kind of try and work out how they had come together in the past and how they're coming together in this context. And it is so good. I love that this did really well with seeing all the positives, the fun of performing, doing what you love, the fan interactions, but also, you know, maybe the crazy diets they have to go on and the image they have to maintain and the stress of being in the public eye the whole time, and the other parts of the job which aren't necessarily parts they'd want to do, but they have to as part of their role as an idol. So I thought this was a really like measured view of everything and really covered both sides of it, and that felt really nice and balanced. And you also therefore get like a lot of ups and downs throughout the book, and it doesn't become monotonous, which I really liked. I will give trigger warnings for suicide. There is a depiction of suicide in someone's memory, and there is also self-harm in this book. So just keep that in mind if you want to read it. I felt like it was handled quite well. However, it's not necessarily something I can speak on, so just keep that in mind. But I thought this was really good. I loved the romance as well. This was cute, and I would very happily read more books in this series if they exist, which I'm not sure if they're going to, but I'd be happy if they did. And then the next book I read. This is by far my favourite book of the month. It was Camp by L C Rosen. I gave this 5 stars. There was pretty much no question the fact I was giving this a 5 star. I loved this book so much. I understand there are some people out there who do not like this book, and I think that is completely understandable. However, I fell in love with this book on the first page and loved it the whole way through, honestly. This follows a boy who goes to a LGBTQ plus summer camp every summer and always takes part in the musical theatre programme. However, there is another boy at this camp who he wants to get their attention, make them fall in love with him. And so he completely changes himself. He changes his look, he loses weight, he changes all his fashion. And instead of doing musical theatre, he signs up for all the sort of sporty options because he thinks this is what this guy is going to be more interested in. And that is obviously not an ideal situation. He is pretending to be someone he's not. He is actually lying to the person he's interested in, saying he's like not the person he was before. But I think it therefore could delve into that really interesting issue of remaking yourself, and are you what you choose to be? Are you sort of what you portray to someone? Like, what is actually like the core of you? Where does that begin? Where does your expression end and like you begin? So that was really, really interesting. I loved the fact it was set in LGBT summer camp. Honestly, I just want to be there, just so bad. And I feel like so many different LGBT issues were drawn into this and topics of discussion. So many different identities. Again, no big deal made of them. They're just there. Everyone's just there and living their best lives. And I liked that also, obviously, because they're in a safe space, everyone genuinely feels they can be themselves. But they also talk about the reality that, yes, they might be able to do this at summer, but a lot of them have to go back home and try and fit in to do what they are expected to do, which is really, really difficult, but at least they get this bit of time to be themselves. And yes, it's not fair that that is the case, but it is a reality for a lot of people. And I think this challenges a lot of people's viewpoints about sort of masculinity and femininity and how that ties in with being LGBT. So I think it's a really sort of almost educational read for a lot of people, as well as a lot of fun with a lot of cute and amazing friendships and romances and everything else. But I feel like for someone who doesn't know too much about the LGBT community, this could be a really, really good entry point, as there are a lot of small bits that are sort of just dotted in that could teach someone who's less familiar a hell of a lot. And even someone like me who's quite involved with the LGBT community feels like I know a decent amount about a lot of things. There was a lot of things in this which made me sort of sit and question how I think about things and how I approach things, and just sort of subconscious opinions I might hold that influence how I think about things. So highly recommend this. I loved it so much. I do understand that some people don't like it because it is basically following the main character manipulating someone else to get what he wants. But at the same time, teenagers are messy. Teenagers are really, really messy and they make awful mistakes, and that's exactly what he's doing, and he learns from it. So yeah, but also on that note of him being messy and making mistakes, I did really like that his friends both support him because they want him to be happy, as well as kind of frequently calling out that what he's doing isn't necessarily a good thing. So again, you see both sides of it. You see him making the mistakes, you see him learning from the mistakes, but he doesn't just have mindless support. He has friends who want to support him and want to be kind, but also kind of are aware that maybe what he's doing isn't the best thing. And then the final book, Cinderella is Dead by Kaylnn Bayron. I wanted to love this so bad. This was the September pick for the FAYS and Gays book club, which I'm a co-host of. I thought this sounded really fun. It's LGBT, it's female, it's sort of a, not retelling, but it follows after the story of Cinderella, and it sounded like such a cool concept. However, I did not like this. I gave this 2.5 stars, and I'm still slightly undecided if it's going to be a 2 or a 2.5. I really didn't like this. I will just say, if you want to see really in-depth thoughts, there will be an hour-long live show discussion of this, which should be going up a few hours after this video, so I'll try and link it up there. But even if you're watching this video later, we leave the live shows up, so you can always go and watch it if you want to, see me discuss this with a few other amazing people. But I didn't like this. I struggled for a while to work out why. I first of all struggled to get myself to keep reading. I just wasn't enjoying it. But then there were a few things about it which actually really annoyed me. And as I said, I love the premise. This basically extreme patriarchal society where women are just property and they are basically sold off to the highest bidder to be their husband. And if you don't get a husband and don't get chosen, then you just get forfeit to the state and have to become a servant to the state. And that, I think, could have been a really interesting concept if they actually went into it. With this being first person, you are seeing one person's view of this society, and obviously the society is hugely flawed and hugely problematic, and she wants it changed. Completely understandable. But you never actually get a full explanation of why she wants it changed other than it's bad. Of course it's bad, you know that from the premise, but I really, really wish they had delved more into like the nitty-gritty detail of it all. Because yes, this is aimed at teenagers, but teenagers are smart, give them credit. Like, I feel like there was a lot of this that was trying to say like, this is a bad thing, therefore change it. This is a bad thing, therefore change it. Which, yes, of course, but explain why and explain how and the actual avenues that could be taken to make things better and the small things everyone could be doing to make things better. Because I'm not saying every book needs to be educational, not in any way, but if you're talking about issues like this, I would assume, at least from my experience when I was a teenager, I would then be the person to take those issues and go and discuss them with other people. And I feel like the people reading this will come out relatively poorly equipped. And yes, it's a starting point, but I just feel like teenagers were not given the credit they should have been in this, that they could take in a lot more information and understand a lot more of the nuance of these debates, so that then if they were to take this issue and go and discuss it in a different forum, that they could then have a more backed up view. And obviously they can do their own research, and that is completely on them if they want to. I just think it was a shame where such interesting topics are being discussed in a really accessible way to stop at that sort of surface level, or at least that's what it felt like to me. It may just be me. I'm going to be interested to have this discussion on Saturday, which is when you'll be seeing this, because I may have just missed something completely. But that frustrated me. There were plot points that frustrated me, but I won't spoil the book, obviously. Overall, it wasn't for me, which is a real shame because I like enjoying books like this and I really thought I would. And I know a lot of my friends have given it like 5 stars, so I was pretty optimistic about it. But no, not for me, sorry. But I would still recommend checking it out because I know a lot of people who've given it 4 or 5 stars, so I do seem to be the anomaly. So that is it. Those are, well, 6 of the 7 books I've read. The other one is on ebook. I had, as we've said, not the best reading month, but I got through it. We're getting back on it now. I managed to kind of keep trucking along with reading a little bit. And I'm not too upset that I didn't get through too many. I read some books I liked. I have basically a new favourite book out of this. So overall, it was all right. But hopefully I'll be coming at you with a much bigger and probably therefore much longer wrap up next month if my TBR goes to plan, because it's big. So wish me luck with that. But yeah, how did your reading go this month? Please let me know down below. Give this video a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Subscribe if you'd like to see more content from me. All my other social medias, including the FAYS and Gays book club, are linked in the description as always, as are links to all of these books if you want to look into them further. But that is it for me, so bye, and I'll see you in the next one.